Well, on Sports First tonight, we bring to you details of the second test match between Sri Lanka and England played at the P. Sara Oval. Sri Lankan captain Mahela Jayawardene scored his 31st test century, which is also the second in this series. Join me, Swan Fernando, with Sports First tonight as we bring to you details of this story and many more.
Bringing you the very latest from here at home and across the world, this is Primetime News, live on News First. A very good evening, I'm Mahina Bongzo.
A very good evening, I'm Ramesh Rugal Bandara. We start off with a look at your headlines. The 8th tranche of the standby facility disbursed by the International Monetary Fund. Sri Lanka Ports Authority decides to route vessels carrying motor vehicles to Hambantota Port. Former High Court Judge M.B.P. Waraweva says that the independence of the judiciary has been destroyed. And US police named suspect in Oakland College shooting.
Moving on to the stories in detail now. The Executive Board of the International Monetary Fund has decided to disburse another tranche of $426.8 million from the $2.6 billion standby facility for Sri Lanka. This is the 8th tranche of the standby facility to be disbursed by the IMF. News First delves into this story.
Following the decision of the International Monetary Fund to grant Sri Lanka a standby facility of $2.6 billion based on certain conditions, Sri Lanka received the first tranche of this facility on the 24th of July 2009.
At the time, due to several reasons, outflows of foreign exchange outweighed inflows of foreign exchange and the country's foreign reserves were falling sharply. Considering the situation, the International Monetary Fund, on an appeal made by Sri Lanka, decided to extend the loan facility in March 2009 following a comprehensive review of the economy. Disbursement of the loan was to be completed by April 2012 and repayment, including the interest component, was to be completed within a 4-year period beginning from then. The IMF also took steps to send a review team to Sri Lanka to study the country's economic performance prior to the disbursement of each tranche.
According to the agreement, the total sum of $2.6 billion was to have been disbursed by March last year. However, even as the date passed, the IMF had only disbursed a sum of $1.5 billion to Sri Lanka in 6 tranches.
The 7th tranche of the standby facility, a sum of $218.3 million, was disbursed by the IMF on the 4th of April last year. At this time, the Central Bank of Sri Lanka stated that in the event the country were to obtain the last 2 tranches of the facility, an additional interest of 2% would have to be paid over the 1.1% interest on funds already received. However, the IMF stated that if the conditions agreed upon are met, the loan facility would be extended.
Following the IMF's 7th review of Sri Lanka's economic performance under the standby arrangement, several policy decisions were made regarding the country's economy.
Increasing fuel prices and electricity charges were among these policy decisions. Meanwhile, bank interest rates were also increased. Another notable decision was to allow supply and demand to determine the foreign exchange rate, which until then had been controlled by the central bank. Furthermore, the government also decided recently to increase several import taxes.
You know, we are fundamentally very optimistic about Sri Lanka's prospects over the medium term, and we always have been. Over the second half of last year, we had some concerns about the policy mix. We had some concerns about the pace at which reserves were being drawn down at the central bank. And on account of that, we didn't move forward with the program for some time. But at the beginning part of this year, the authorities, central bank and government, took some very decisive steps to control the current account deficit and to make sure that the growth in this economy was going to be sustainable. And I think that's really a theme that I want to focus on. That we are very concerned about making sure that the growth we've seen, the good progress we've seen over the last couple of years, could be sustained over the medium term so that the welfare of the entire country can be continue to increase. We're really quite positive that the steps that they've taken are in the right direction in terms of getting the current account under control and laying the foundations for maintaining that growth over the medium term. And it's on account of that that we thought we'll go ahead with this review, and the board endorsed completion of the review.
The IMF also decided to extend the time frame for the disbursement of the standby facility to the 23rd of July 2012, as the total sum had not been disbursed within the time frame first agreed upon.
It was to expire at the end of May, I think, and now it's been extended to July 23rd, end of
However, the opposition charges that the government has fulfilled all conditions laid down by the IMF in order to obtain the latest tranche.
ලංකාවට විදේශ ප්‍රතිපත්තියක් නෑ වගේම ලංකාවට ආර්ථික ප්‍රතිපත්තියකුත් නෑ. දැන් මං ගාව අද
Sri Lanka has neither a foreign policy or an economic policy. I have with me the document signed by the government and the IMF. As stated in the document, we depreciated the rupee first by 3% and then left it to be determined completely by market forces.
වෙනද පොලේ රුපියලේ යගේ තීරණය වෙන විදියට අපි ඒ දෙක කරා. එක දෙක මොකක්ද කියන්නේ? Policy rates were raised and directions were given to banks to limit their credit growth. මොකක්ද කියන්නේ? අපි පොලි අනුපාතය ඉහළ දැම්මා.
Then the government increased the interest rates. It took steps to limit loans granted by commercial banks.
In keeping with global price developments, domestic petroleum and electricity prices were increased by an average of 32% and 20% respectively. ඉන්ධන මිල සහ
They said that the prices of petrol, diesel and kerosene were not increased on the basis of IMF conditions. Today they have shamelessly signed this document.
ලාම්පු තෙල් මිල වැඩි කරේ IMF එකත් එක්ක තියෙන කිසිම ගනුදෙනුවක් නිසා නෙමෙයි කියලා කිව්වා. අද ලැජ්ජ නැතුව මේක ලියලා අස්සම් කරලා දෙනවා.
ආණ්ඩුව ජාත්‍යන්තර මූල්‍ය අරමුදල් ණය වාරිය කියන
On every occasion, the government said that it no longer needed the IMF standby facility. However, less than 24 hours after making the same statement, the government was forced to run begging behind the IMF. Just 3 months into 2012, the government has already made so many drastic decisions which affect the monetary markets and the import and export markets.
මේ මාස තුන ඇතුළත මූල්‍ය ශාස්ත්‍රයට වෙළඳ පොළට ආනයන අපනයන වෙළඳ පොළට විශාල ලෙස බලපාන තීන්දුව තීරණ කීපයක් ආණ්ඩුව ගත්තා.
I think our view throughout was that it would be good to take measures not just to finance the current account deficit, but to bring the current account deficit under control itself. Because capital flows are difficult to mobilize. They may take more time than required. And I think that's basically what we've seen them doing right now, taking firm steps to control the current account, while at the same time continuing these strong efforts to bring capital in from overseas. And that's appropriate. And we've seen a lot of success in the last few weeks even on that score, with money coming into the stock exchange and in other ways. So that there was in fact this a miss of the net international reserves target at the end of December because they were running down reserves. But what we've seen now is that they have taken very substantial corrective actions to get the ship back on track. So yes, there was a loss of reserves, but now we feel that with these policies, the current account deficit will be reduced, that the need to supply dollars into the market will be reduced, that the reserves will be preserved. And it's on the basis of that corrective action that we said, okay, we can waive that target for December and move forward. We are charging an interest rate that, it's a floating rate, but it's based on LIBOR, but basically it is around 1.1%. That 1.1% rate applies up to a certain amount of lending. Once you get above a certain level, which in Sri Lanka's case is about $2 billion, then any excess over that will attract a 200 basis point surcharge, 2% surcharge. So that is to say that right now, out of the $2.13 billion which have been dispersed, $2 billion are attracting an interest rate of 1.1% or thereabouts, and $130 million extra is attracting an interest rate of 3.1%.
Well, let's now take a look at the cartoon of the day selected from amongst today's English newspapers.
The new Mathura District Secretary's office in the Mathura Fort was vested in the public by President Mahinda Rajapaksa today. Shortly after the opening, the President chaired the District Development Progress meeting, which was held at the new District Secretariat. The President stated at this meeting that the views and ideas of both the government and the opposition must be obtained to plan development projects that are compatible with future needs. A sum of 140 million rupees was spent on the construction of the 3-story building, which is equipped with all modern facilities. Administrative units in Mathura, which operated from various locations, will now be brought under the same roof at the new district secretariat. Having listened to the public officials and representatives at the District Development Progress meeting, the President said that it must be ensured that development plans for the future are presented in a proper manner.
You must say in which year, in which place and at what time a particular project will be completed. We must know where this is being built and where that is being built, for example, a blood bank, so that we know where and when it will be opened.
Former High Court Judge W.M.P.B. Warawava says that the Attorney General's department has been politicized. He made this comment at a seminar yesterday.
The third stage of the series of seminars under the theme Justice for Life was held yesterday at the E.L. Senanayake Library Auditorium in Kandy. The executive and the constitutional authority have destroyed the supremacy of the judiciary. Likewise, the judiciary itself has destroyed its own independence. Today, the relief granted to a politician involved in a murder is not provided to an ordinary person. The Attorney General and the Attorney General's department have been politicized. There are talented officials, but their hands are tied. Every month in High Court, around 3 cases are withdrawn by the Attorney General. Those charged in such cases are politicians or those with political affiliations. If democracy is to be safeguarded, the independence of the judiciary should be safeguarded. If the independence of the judiciary is to be safeguarded, the appointment of judges to courts should be done in a transparent manner. Political appointments are made to the judiciary. If Justice Warawava wanted, he could have easily extended his tenure. This is the reality. The judiciary has been politicized. Only the voice of the judge is emitted from courts. That is why we have been requesting for a Judicial Services Commission and an independent police as well. Don't transform the police into government servants. Police stations around the country have been politicized. If they try to unravel the truth, they are transferred, or else they are sent on mandatory leave. The police has become the henchman of the government.
Now, the full speech of former High Court Judge W.M.P.B. Warawava can be viewed on our website www.newsfirst.lk.
In other local news, former Army Commander Sarath Fonseca was brought to a private hospital in Colombo for treatment today.
Former Army Commander Sarath Fonseca was brought to hospital for physiotherapy treatment and for the renewal of his medical prescription. This government is exploiting the Geneva issue to obtain political advantage. The Geneva issue does not pose any problems for our citizens. There is no issue for the country either. It is the government which is suppressing the people and violating human rights that is facing this issue. Don't get yourself involved in this. Let the government sort out this mess.